Hey folks, Ryan here from Mr. Row's Gaming Rants and Reviews, and I've got a good old rant for you today. Well, it's not much of a rant, as more of it's kind of like a response or a rebuttal to something I saw on the interwebs earlier this week, and that is James Hudson, Druid City Games, formerly Skybound Games. He came out with a very interesting topic that, Rob from the Meeple Dungeon and Jason from Dice and Dragons and I have been talking about a little bit quite frequently lately on Jason's Kickstarter excess or value episodes on his channel. Is when we've been taking a look at some of the Kickstarter projects and crowdfunding projects, we've been coming across the Acrylic Standee and the miniature components of board games, and we've seen it all in between. And James put out a poll on Twitter. I'm just going to switch over to it right now here. And we can see that he asked the question, if a project had acrylic standees instead of minis, which afforded a little lower MSRP and much less shipping costs, would you prefer that? Doing some field research. 733 people voted on just the Twitter poll. I think he did something similar on a different social media site. But almost 80% of the people voted for the acrylic standee, which is cool. That's not a small number there. And so he said, hey, okay, this is interesting. Had to make a video to deep dive it. And this is a little bit of a response to that video because I found that video very entertaining, very interesting. I'm a guy who is interested in economics at the best of times. And so I always appreciate these little industry insights type of things anytime that I can get them. The Too Long Don't Read version of the video is that he is thinking about now going towards the acrylic standee as opposed to the miniatures for an upcoming project called Bloodstone. Now, Bloodstone already went to crowdfunding once, and they pulled the project backwards just because they had got some comments about the cost of the product versus what they were actually getting in the game. So that was kind of like what my takeaway was. And so they kind of are reapproaching things. And now one of the things is that they want to maybe replace the miniatures with acrylic standees. And I'm all for it. That's the spoiler alert here, is because in lots of the projects that I have seen coming up recently here, I think there is a shift in the thinking of lots of gamers here, where we maybe not want the big gigantic boxes full of miniatures that we are probably not going to end up painting eventually. I'll circle back to that later. And if you don't know what an acrylic standee, definitely go back and look them up here. Here's a project that has just recently been fulfilled, hitting people's hands. Lots of pictures around it. I don't have any experience with this game, but Vagrant Song has acrylic standees in it, and you can kind of see, you get that full picture artwork on it already in color. And so it's already popping out on the table there. You don't have to paint them up to make them look realistic or anything like that. They're just already there. Another project that I'm very interested in getting, hopefully very, very soon, and that is Disney Sorcerer's Arena. They have all of the Disney characters here in acrylic standee form, full color. Okay, and this easily could have been a miniatures version game, but this is produced by the Op, and they are known for their family style games and trying to keep that MSRP, that retail price, a little bit lower, a little bit more affordable, so we can put this into the big box retail stores and whatnot. And so, of course, going with the acrylic standee versus the miniature is going to keep that cost down quite a bit. Another one there that I've been playing a little bit of lately is Uprising, Curse of the Last Emperor. Now, this has a different version of the acrylic standee, as instead of it being printed on clear, they actually added color around the borders and the edges and everything. And these, man, oh, you put these on the table, man, you know what faction you belong to. They pop. That color comes out exuberantly. So, yeah, so those are some examples, and I know there's lots more out there that are coming out there. There's a project that I saw that's out on Twitter every now and then. Hydro Soakers has got these acrylic standees on them and everything like that. So let's dive into James's video a little bit here. One thing that he did mention that I was actually very surprised about was that he says, I think that, you know, the acrylic standee per unit does cost more to produce, but on the other hand, the miniatures, though, it's the molding that is driving up the massive amount of cost on a miniatures style game. It's the molds that, and then the more detailed the mold, the higher the price is going to end up being. And so they need to produce X thousands numbers of miniatures and sell X thousands probably of games in order to make that like a cost-effective thing. If you're only going to sell a couple thousand as opposed to maybe 10, 20,000, it's going to cost a lot because the mold itself is going to be very, very expensive, but then you can use that mold over and over and over again. So that was one thing. But one thing that we do know about the acrylic standee as opposed to the miniatures is that miniatures take up a lot of space. They take up a lot of space inside the game box, and these boxes end up being huge, or you end up getting multiple boxes. I'm looking at Common Games here, their latest project that just fulfilled here, X-Men Marvel United. I got 11 boxes of content, lots of it miniatures and stuff like that. I imagine a alternate universe world where Common Games is actually producing these style games with acrylic standees or standees, and how much less space it takes up. That's just one thing that we saw. So not only is the not taking up as much room in the box, so the boxes can be slightly smaller. There we go. There's something. The boxes can be slightly smaller. What also can make the box actually slightly smaller too, as he mentions, is that miniatures need to have a fair-sized board to play on, or something like that, some sort of terrain to play on. Now, if I replace that with the standee, well, the board doesn't need to be as big. You can shrink that board down 10, 15% in size and still get the exact same experience, because that standee is not requiring as much space, not only in the box, but not even on the board. So there you go. They were cutting down the size of the box. Smaller boxes means I can put more games into a container for shipping purposes. And the box might not even be as heavy. Though that's one thing that he kind of got into, and I might have to do some research on that, is the weight of a mini versus the weight of an acrylic standee. And if you're packing more standees in a box as opposed to miniatures, where does it balance out eventually? If I have more minis, bigger boxes, or more standees, smaller boxes, does that even out? That's some calculus that people would have to figure out and make sure that it is cost effective and everything. But I can see that the standee version would probably, in the long run, run costs quite a bit lower. He was suggesting maybe about like that 15-20%, maybe even as high as 30% lower MSRP values. I can easily see probably about that 15%, which is still that's a significant cost. If you're talking about $100 game, now it's coming down to like an $85-$80 game. Pinching pennies nowadays. That's what it's all about. Now there has been some rebuttal out there in the community. The miniatures people came out in droves saying, no, we want our miniatures, we want our things to paint. But let's be realistic. How do you paint all of these things? And what is your time worth in painting all of these things? If you're just buying a game just to paint the miniatures, are you even actually playing the game as well? If you are, that's a bonus. But there are lots of products out there that you can just buy miniatures if you just want to just, fulfill your painting hobby drive or something like that. We're talking about these games as a whole, and I think we are starting to see that shift. This poll, 733. That's not a small number of people. It's a small number of people if that was an actual crowdfunding campaign, but it is a very small number of. That's not a small number of people. Sorry, that's what I'm trying to say here. That they're saying, you know what? Let's start shifting our focus now to the acrylic standee, as opposed to, the miniatures. I've been a miniatures guy for a long time. I don't even paint. Okay, I don't have the patience or the attention span in order to do that hobby, or I don't even have the time either to do any painting. The acrylic standee, when I first saw those things, I said, wow, I would much rather, I didn't even know this type of product existed at the time. I would much rather my games have these rather than the minis, because they're never going to get painted. They stay colorless. They stay gray or whatever color they come in for the duration that I own the game. Okay? But these acrylic standees really stand out. And I love that you can put the artwork right on there. They're colorful. There's not many arguments here against a game having the standees as opposed to the miniatures. And I think this might be the next year. Take from like now to the next year, the next 2 years. I think we're going to really see a lot more of the standee versions of games as opposed to miniatures. And that was kind of one of the things that he leaves his video off on, is if you have just acrylic standees, is this feel like a deluxe product to you? And I say, as a consumer, James, yes. If I had two side by side, if I had cardboard standees versus acrylic standees, those acrylic standees really stand above the rest as opposed to those cardboard. There's no comparison. They're so much more nicer. The tactile feel of them, yeah. I think this might be the shift in the quote unquote deluxe version of the games. Now, if you really, really want to make your version of the game the deluxe version on crowdfunding, we are probably starting to look back at, the exclusives. Okay, the things that you can only get during the campaign, that you won't be able to get at retail, you won't be able to get it anywhere else type thing. Those are going to be the things that you're going to probably have to really make your game the deluxe version. The acrylic standee version versus the cardboard standee version, but the acrylic standee version has like extra things still inside of it. That's probably the marketing ploy going forward if you're not going to have these miniatures anymore. And we can't even I don't think we can entertain the option of having a standee version and a miniatures version, just because of that fact alone, that the molds of those miniatures cost so much, from my understanding, that it's not viable to have both versions running at the same time, because that's just going to skyrocket the costs of the games. They're going to balance each other out type thing. So you can't run both. You can't have your cake and eat it too type thing. Okay, I think I've ran my course around the acrylic standee versus the miniature. I am totally 100% team acrylic standee. They look absolutely amazing. Leave a comment to this video below. Are you team standee? Are you team miniature? And please tell me why. I'm really interested in this discussion, because I, for one, used to be a miniatures preferred. I thought that those were the deluxe things. I'm starting to shift my mind. My brain is starting to think, you know what? I can still get a premium game if I just had acrylic standees as opposed to those miniatures. For me, they're not going to get painted. And there's so many other people out there. Maybe 733, 80% of those 733, they're never going to paint miniatures. Don't pander to the, now, what is it? According to this poll, about 20% of people that do, they can get their miniature somewhere else to paint. Okay, or they can find something to replace their standees with some miniatures. Okay, those types of products exist. We already have to do those with lots of other products in the gaming industry. Inserts. I already have to go to a third-party thing to get an insert for some of my games. Why can't I just go to a third-party place that could get me miniatures for my game now? Type of thing. Maybe that's an interesting way that this industry is going to start going. Maybe there's going to be third-party miniatures makers, but again, I don't know what the costs are. That's just me spewing an idea here at the end. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a comment below. Team Acrylic Standee, Team Miniature, which one are you? And if you're enjoying the videos that I'm producing on this show, please consider subscribing to the channel and clicking that notification bell for when new videos are dropping. I'm starting to get into a little bit of a schedule again here. So, all right. I think I've said my piece about the stand. Go Team Standee. That's where I'm leaving it. So I think I am going to end off this show by officially saying that this rant is over.